Everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We've got a great live Q&A for you today. If you missed Tuesday's show, it was a deep dive on all the nefarious ways that gluten can impact your health beyond celiac disease. Most people think gluten is only responsible for creating celiac problems, but the reality is there is a plethora of illness that is associated with gluten beyond celiac disease. And if you missed that show, you definitely want to go back and watch it. That show is a culmination of 20 years of clinical practice experience, but also a culmination and a review of all the research around this very important topic. So it helps you understand just how pervasive gluten in your life can be beyond celiac. Now, if you've got gluten-related questions today, those are the ones I'm really going to prioritize answering. So go ahead and type those in now to your chat box, and I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I can over the next hour. And if you haven't already, make sure you support our mission. At Gluten Free Society, our goal is to save 100 million lives, and you can support us this week by going over to glutenfreesociety.org. And if you're not already signed up for our newsletter, it's the one way that you can receive information from us uncensored, unchecked, unfettered, uncensored. We've been getting censored for the last several years because of our message of truth. And so if you want to make sure you're kind of bypassing that censorship, you can come over there and subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll send you a bunch of free information. And when we have updates and things, you'll always get it, even if our other social channels decide that the information should be hidden from you. Beyond that, you can support us by using our products, Gluten Free Society supplement line. And this week we have a very special discount on our DNA test kits. If you're wondering whether or not gluten-free is the right way for you to go, and you're not quite sure, maybe you've taken our free quiz and you're still not quite sure, and you want to get confirmation, you can do genetic testing. And right now, genetic testing is 20% off. So it's really our deepest discount that we ever offer. So you can check that out. I'll put a link up below this, and no coupon code necessary. The savings are already in place and they're there. So if you are, again, in the market for learning whether or not that is what you need to do, check that out. Okay, let's check out your questions. Rita asks, how does gluten sensitivity cause iron deficiency? Great question. Iron deficiency is the most common nutritional deficiency linked to gluten damage of your stomach and small intestine. There are, in your stomach, you've got specialized cells that help secrete acid. These cells that make acid, that acid is necessary for breaking iron off of the food that you eat. So in order for you to disassociate the iron from the food so that it's free and ready to be absorbed, you need those cells working really, really well. Well, gluten damages those cells, thus contributing to and creating a reduced capacity to absorb iron. But something else gluten does is it can damage the stomach and small intestine, and that can cause what's known as occult blood loss, occult, O-C-C-U-L-T. Occult blood loss means you're losing blood through your stool and you don't even know it, because when you're bleeding in your stomach or when you're bleeding in your small intestine, what happens is that blood comes out the other end and it's oxidized. It turns brown, so you don't even recognize it. It's not like a bright red blood in the toilet bowl. So if you have occult blood loss and you have it every day, you're slowly losing blood every day, which causes depletion of iron stores. So those two mechanisms are the most common reasons why we see gluten-induced iron deficiency and leading to anemias. So many of you have been told you have iron deficiency anemia. In my opinion, if you're diagnosed with iron deficiency anemia and you take iron and you can't correct the anemia or it keeps coming back, you need to be tested for gluten sensitivity. Let's see here. What multivitamin, Tammy wants to know, what multivitamin do you recommend for us who have malabsorption diagnoses? My opinion is a little biased here, Tammy, because I've formulated a blend called Ultra Nutrients. And we'll put a link up for you to go and check that out and look more in depth at it. But it's a high-powered multivitamin, multi-mineral. It contains a lot of the essentials that you're going to need, and even in doses that are meaningful if you have malabsorption. A lot of people believe that malabsorption creates or makes vitamins worthless. And that's not true at all. Malabsorption makes it harder to absorb nutrients, but malabsorption, it's not all or none. It's not like you absorb nothing or you absorb everything. It's like a dimmer switch. There are levels or shades of malabsorption. And so depending on the extensive nature of yours, or maybe it's more mild, you're still going to benefit from taking a high-quality multivitamin, multimineral with meaningful doses, because absorption just doesn't go away. Again, it can be compromised, but it doesn't go away. Okay. I'll keep going down there.
That's all the questions.
Okay.
This is today.
Okay, so here we go. Gluten-free, dairy-free, and clean eating for 2 years. Everything has been great except for grass-fed red meat. In Phoenix, we have struggled to find grass-fed beef that is edible after it's been frozen. The fat part gets tough as nails, it seems. Is this typical with grass-fed beef after being frozen? It can be. There's a company that I like that generally isn't too terribly tough. It's U.S. Wellness Meats, and that's one you can look those guys up, and they do delivery as well. And the taste and the flavor is pretty good, and the tenderness of the steaks, etc., is pretty good as well. Beyond that, you know, to me, one of the best things you can do, just depending on where you live, is find a local farmer. And there's a really good website called localharvest.org, and you can type in your zip code, and it'll give you back all the local farmers and farmers markets and things of that nature in your area, and try to find somebody who's actually harvesting, growing beef cattle on their own land. I know I had a doctor friend of mine reached out to me last night because we have some friends in Wyoming that are getting ready to take out some bison. And anyway, if you can find and know the farmers, that is where you have the most, let's just say, knowledge of where your food is coming from. That's the safest bet for you. And if you can find it locally, it'll taste better. Okay. Scroll down on the left. Teresa asks, is it true that if you haven't been eating gluten, then tests for it will not be accurate? No. And yes. Let's dive into that a little bit. If you're going to do an antibody test, like a blood test, where they're measuring something called anti-gliadin antibodies, or anti-endomysial antibodies, or anti-tissue transglutaminase, these are kind of the hallmark tests that are done to diagnose celiac disease. For those tests to be positive, you have to be eating gluten. And most doctors will make you eat gluten for up to 8 weeks before doing that test. Otherwise, you can get a false negative. I don't like those tests for that reason, because if you feel better being off of gluten, why would you punish your body and yourself for 2 months just so you can get a confirmation? The other problem with those types of tests, you can also get a false negative, because gluten causes immune suppression for many people, so their antibody levels are compromised, and so using a test that measures antibodies as a tool to try to get a diagnosis can sometimes lead to a false negative. So those tests, not the most accurate. Certainly you can use them, and if they're positive, they're definitely positive. But if they're negative, it doesn't mean they're definitely negative, and I certainly wouldn't encourage anyone who feels horrible eating gluten to direct their health for 2 months beforehand. This is one of the reasons why I recommend genetic testing, because you can do DNA testing and it will never be affected by your diet. You have the genes you have, period. And so if you have the genes that predispose you to react to gluten, then you have them. And so no amount of gluten is going to impact a positive or a negative result in that type of test. So it's a very easy way to get an accurate assessment of whether or not changing your diet is a good move for you to make. Let's see here. Can gluten sensitivity be the cause of a cyst on the pineal gland? Roxy wants to know. I have not seen that in my own experience clinically. I haven't read any research or literature on that either, Roxy. So hard for me to comment where I don't have experience in that regard. I like these. Some of these comments are just people chiming in about how much better they feel. Asthma gone, pain gone, nerve pain gone, going gluten-free. Keep those comments coming, guys, because there may be some people on this feed listening who are debating in their own mind whether or not the diet change is worth it. And so your commentary might be the straw that proverbially breaks them in the right direction toward the right diet to get those changes. Let's see here. I did your test. So Hannah's asking, I did your test and have 2 copies of 0501 HLA-DQ2. And then I also have an 0201 and an 0301 on my beta 1 genotype. Am I high risk for developing celiac? So the answer to that question is you have, if we're looking at your genes, you have 2 0501s. Those are both what we call HLA-DQ2s. So those, I'm going to bore half the crowd here. So you have 2 HLA-DQ2s on your alpha 1 gene, and you have 1 HLA-DQ2 on your beta 1 gene. That means you have 3 HLA-DQ2s. So that certainly increases the likelihood of you developing celiac disease. So understand that gluten genes don't always manifest as celiac disease. You do have 3 markers for gluten sensitivity, so it does increase the odds that gluten or that celiac disease can manifest in you, but it doesn't guarantee that it will. And that's kind of the dangerous message I hear a lot of doctors preach, is that if you don't have celiac gene markers, then you don't need to worry about it. But at the end of the day, you've got 3 out of 4 markers that are positive. In my experience, with that kind of positivity, you're about as gluten sensitive as they come, and avoiding gluten would be the right move to make. And because celiac disease is only one of many manifestations of gluten exposure, I mean, I wouldn't worry so much about celiac disease. I would worry about all of the different potential ways that gluten can cause inflammation and contribute to disease if you continue to eat it. Does spirit vinegar contain gluten? What's the spirit made from? Vinegars are made from different types of things, and so you could, because you can make vinegar out of so many different things, give me the base ingredient of the vinegar and I can give you a better answer. And if you're talking about vinegar, now if you're talking about alcohol, we did a whole show on gluten-free alcohols that you can go check out, and we can put a link up to that for you as well. Hi, Dr. Osborne, can gluten cause thrombosis? Also, what are some natural ways to use for thinning of the blood? Anush is asking. So the answer, can gluten cause thrombosis? The answer is yes. What are some natural ways to use for thinning of the blood? Well, my favorite thing to make sure that everyone who's worried about blood viscosity or who wants healthy blood viscosity is to use omega-3. And so a nice omega-3 blend with EPA and DHA. If you're looking for a really solid, good one, the one I use clinically all the time is called Ultra Omega, and you can find that at Gluten Free Society as well. Other things that can or that will naturally keep the blood thinner, one is vitamin E. You can use what are called proteolytic enzymes. We have a blend of that called matrozyme. You can use other independent proteolytic enzymes like nattokinase and serrapeptidase. These are things that have these types of properties. And then herbally, ginkgo biloba can thin the blood quite well. I've seen cases where people taking ginkgo started to have spontaneous nose bleeding because their dose was too strong. So it thins the blood that well. That being said, if you are taking medicine to thin your blood and you're adding these other things to your repertoire, you really should talk to your doctor and work with your doctor so that you don't overdo it and create a bigger problem. Let's see here. If my test results shows an 0501 and an 0602 on my HLA-DQ1 gene, Does it mean both? So you maybe misspoke there. So you have an O501 and an O602, which means you have a double DQ1, so you're homozygous for DQ1. Does that mean both of your parents are gluten sensitive or just one of them? It depends. Did your O501 and O602 come on your beta 1 gene or on your alpha 1 gene? So if they're both on the same gene, then one of your parents gave you one of those markers and the other one of your parents gave you the other one of those markers. So it just depends on whether or not those genes are coupled on, those alleles are coupled on one gene or they're coupled on another. If we start getting into this type of language, it gets very confusing if you're not in tune with understanding the genetics. And I actually have, for those of you who want to do a deeper dive, I have a master class on this topic, and you can check that out. It's free. It's glutenology.net/registration. And there's an entire module on which genes are celiac, which genes are non-celiac gluten sensitive, and how those genes are passed on, from parents to children, etc. And so it's much better to watch that module where there's visual, because if I start talking about alleles and beta and alpha 1 and spouting out numbers, it just gets super confusing for most people. My lab test showed I had sky-high anti-gliadin IgA and secretory IgA. Does that mean I'm gluten sensitive? I've been following your diet for a year now and feel amazing. Thank you. That's great. I'm glad you're feeling so much better. It does mean that you're gluten sensitive. Specifically, it means you're gliadin sensitive because it's an anti-gliadin antibody. And understand that gliadin is the name of one type of gluten found in wheat. There are other forms of gluten. Gliadin is the type found in wheat. So what you really actually had done when you had your anti-gliadin test done is you had a wheat gluten antibody test done. It's very confusing, I know, because a lot of doctors will run that test as a definitive, and they don't know that gliadin is only found in wheat. There are other kinds of gluten found in barley, rye, oats, etc. And that particular test you had done won't show you whether you're reacting to those other things. But for sure, you're reacting to wheat gluten, which is what gliadin is. Not sure I understand this question. What does a high steatocrit mean? I did a GI test and it came back positive. High steatocrit means you have fat malabsorption. And so you're either, well, it can mean two things. It means either that you have fat malabsorption, but if you're on like a heavy fat, high keto diet, you could have a high steatocrit by default of eating so much fat. But if you're not on a high fat diet, a high steatocrit generally means you're having fat malabsorption problems. So my spondyloarthritis is still intense. My lower back muscle pain are still there when I walk. Doctor says it might be neuropathic or fibromyalgic pain. If your diet is grain-free already, and dairy and sugar-free, and you're still struggling in that regard, honestly, you've got to dial in and get testing done, because it could be such a random thing. You could be reacting to any kind of food and still having an autoimmune reaction stimulate your back stiffness. Neuropathic pain can be ruled out, by the way. You can go to a good doctor and they should be able to rule out, just with some orthopedic testing, neuropathic pain. Fibromyalgic pain is a little different because fibromyalgia is an esoteric diagnosis that's very subjective in its mannerism. So I wouldn't, if your doctor's claiming fibromyalgia, you got to get more definitive than that. But neuropathic pain could be ruled in or out. So if you do have true neuropathic pain, good orthopedic testing should be able to help you understand whether that's happening. Because beyond that, if it's just inflammatory pain and a driving forward of your autoimmune response, you've got to get additional testing to get deeper insight. Do you recommend using nutritional yeast for the B vitamins? No, I do not, Cheryl. We have an article on yeast, nutritional yeast, and other types of yeast. It's on Gluten Free Society, I think. It's recently published on the blog. I would encourage you, Cheryl, we'll put a link up for you. I'd encourage you to read that article and get more information about yeast. Have you considered doing a concentrated liquid slurry version of GI Soothe? I mean, we have one. So good news is, yeah, I have considered it, and we have one. It's called GI Shield. And that also you can pick up at Gluten Free Society. So if you are struggling with taking GI Soothe, which is an encapsulated version, you can try GI Shield, and you just mix it with liquid and drink it. If you have GI Soothe, you can also break those capsules open and stir it up into a liquid and drink it as well. But GI Shield is designed to add to liquids to drink, so it has a more pleasant flavor. A lot of you have genetic questions. I get this quite a bit, MTHFR, and this question is more along the lines of this CBS gene. Look, your genes are not why you're sick. Now, I know that may contradict a lot of what you've read or listened to on the internet, on blogospheres, etc., on podcasts. Genes are important, don't get me wrong. I think they can give us good information, but don't blame your CBS mutation on why you feel bad. There's nothing you need to do about your CBS mutation other than make sure that your body is not at odds with your environment. Where people go wrong when they have genetic mutations is their body's at odds with their environment, and their genetic mutations enhance the detriment that their environment creates. So, CBS, which is a gene that helps to metabolize glutathione appropriately, if you have an environment that requires you need more glutathione to protect you from the poisons of that environment, and you also have that mutation, you can do things with that mutation, but ultimately you need to change your environment. You can't change your genes, but you can change the expression of your genes by altering your environment, which is altering your choices. And that by far is so much more powerful than just doing a genetic test and then trying to supplement, which I see this all the time. Look, I did this for 5 years clinically. Almost 20 years ago, I helped co-create one of the first direct-to-consumer genetic SNP tests. These types of tests, based largely on the work of a scientist by the name of Bruce Ames, I call him the father of genetic SNPs because he was researching and talking about it before anyone else. And we measured genes like CBS and MTHFR, and we tried very hard to take people with these mutations and give them supplements based on their mutation. So, for example, if you had a CBS mutation, we could give you more vitamin B6. If you had an MTHFR mutation, we could give you more folate, methylfolate. And the outcomes weren't good, meaning that supplementing a genetic mutation does not lead to an improvement of a person's health. But what did lead to an improvement of those individuals' health was altering their diets and altering their behavioral patterns. And so, again, diet change, if you haven't already gone there, is far more powerful than trying to supplement your genes. Your genes aren't broken. Let's just summarize it by saying your genes are a gift from God. They are not broken. You do not have a bad set of them. Now, you may have an argument with me if, say, you're a Down syndrome or cystic fibrosis. Those are genetic disorders that are obviously genetic in nature. But the average person out there does not have bad genes. And so trying to blame your genes for your health problem is a mistake. Blame your environment, blame your choices. Now, a lot of people don't want to look in the mirror and blame themselves for the situation that they're in. And I'm not saying that if you're sick that you're somehow a bad person or that you're somehow at fault for being a bad person or a stupid person. But, chronic illness, chronic autoimmune inflammatory disease is largely a disease of choice. And sometimes we're making choices that we don't know are wrong, right? And so this is where, first just acknowledging that you could do things differently, then embarking on a journey that helps you to identify what things need to be done differently. And an example of that is going gluten-free. Are you gluten sensitive? Does going gluten-free need to be a diet change that you make in order to quit inflaming your body so that those gene mutations that you have that give you a disadvantage when you're inflamed won't allow you to dig out of the hole of illness, right? But because you can't change your genes, all you can do is change your choices. So know that your genes are not a curse, but trying to supplement them is not going to make you better. And you have to go deeper. You have to dive in and look at your behavior, your diet, your lifestyle. There are 6 non-negotiable fundamentals of good health, right? What are they? You have to eat the right food for you. You have to exercise, get sunshine. You have to get good quality sleep. You have to drink quality water. Water, you're 70% water. And if you're drinking poisonous water, it's not a good thing. And you have to get good quality air. Those things are not negotiable. Beyond that, you should mitigate and manage your stress, your emotional and environmental stress, your work stress. Like, you should have good life balance in that way. Those factors are going to have far more of a reach on improving your health than trying to supplement genetic variants that you pick up on a test like 23andMe. To me, honestly, if you're starting with those types of tests, you're wasting your money. You need to go look in the other direction first. And look, I was just as guilty of it as anyone else. We did, like I said, we did those types of tests for 5 years in a clinic setting and did not find improved outcomes by supplementing people's genetics. So maybe we should bookmark that little segment for its own video, because so many people ask that question, and I just want to make sure you're all clear. I feel burning in my stomach when I take potassium citrate on an empty stomach. Any thoughts? Try taking it with food. Sometimes minerals can upset an empty stomach, so take it with food first. If it still irritates you, then it's probably not a supplement you want to take. How do I fight against high cholesterol when eating mostly red meat? Well, whoever told you needed to fight against high cholesterol? I think maybe, Nicole, you should watch our video on the cholesterol myth. We can put a link up for that video for you to watch. Because most people think that cholesterol is an enemy, and I would argue that cholesterol is your friend, and high cholesterol is a relative term. When I started practice 22 years ago, high cholesterol was 280, above 280, and then it got changed to 250, then it got changed to 220, then it got changed again to 200. Well, guess who's responsible for making the change? You'll never guess. Let's just see if anybody can guess. Okay, first person that guesses who was responsible for making these cholesterol changes, we'll send you a free gluten-free tote bag for the summertime. So let's just keep an eye out on who gets the answer right and let me know. And I'll come back to answer your question, Nicole. Can gluten cause deep vein thrombosis? Yes, I think I answered that one already. It can. DVTs and clotting are some side effects that gluten can absolutely cause. Do lentils contain gluten? No, lentils are gluten-free. However, many people with gluten sensitivity have damaged GI tracts, Julia. And if your GI tract is damaged from gluten, if you try to eat a bunch of lentils are very hard to digest. And so if you put a bunch of that in your diet as staple food and you're trying to recover your gut function from years of gluten-induced damage, then you may not tolerate them very well. So you have to be really careful. And if you read No Grain, No Pain, this is one of the reasons why we cut lentils and legumes out of the diet. It's so that we first get a recovery of the GI tract and the functionality of the GI tract so that you're capable of digesting well. Let's see here. If the DNA genetic test is purchased, how long can one hold on to it before using it? Is there an expiration date? No, you can hold on to it as long as you need to. There's no expiration date. It's swabs, and all you're doing is swabbing the inside of your cheek to get a DNA sample. Is it beneficial to do genetic testing for mold sensitivity? Not in my opinion. And that's not to say we haven't done that too. I've done that clinically. What I found, Barbara, was everybody's sensitive to mold who's in it. Mold is a poison. Mold toxins specifically are poisons to humans, to all humans, no matter what your genetic predisposition could be. Mold toxins are poisonous to all humans. They're a general poison. Okay, so Lita says, my daughter and I do not have celiac genes per downloading, then uploading from 23andMe to an online app. Are you saying there's a gene for sensitivity? Yeah. There are genes for celiac, which 23andMe does measure. Those are called DQ2, DQ8 patterns. And then there are what are called non-celiac gluten sensitivity genetic patterns. And so 23andMe does not measure those. None of the online labs that I've seen measure those except for the one we do at Gluten Free Society. So if you want to have non-celiac gluten sensitivity genes measured to rule it out, then you can use our testing services. What vitamins and minerals are usually low with gluten sensitivity? Can it also increase certain levels like copper? No, gluten sensitivity doesn't necessarily cause an increase in copper. I'd say more the opposite. It can cause deficiency. But so I think we have a video on that very topic of vitamins and minerals usually low in gluten sensitivity. The 5 most common that I see are iron, vitamin D, vitamin B12, omega-3, and zinc rather. Those 5, hands down. And when I read one of these days, I'll retire to write and publish data over the course of my career. But that, I would say, those 5 are the top 5 we see in people with confirmed gluten sensitivity. How do we fix malabsorption? You figure out what's causing it. I mean, malabsorption is usually caused by something that's damaging the GI tract itself. So if you have malabsorption, you got to figure out why you have malabsorption. There are a number of things that can cause it. Pesticides, certain medications, certain food sensitivities can cause it, certain types of microbial or bacterial and fungal imbalances. I mean, there's just a host of different things that could contribute to it. Let's see, can you go back up just a little bit? I think there's a question kind of in that. Okay, so Barbara's saying, I have a previous gene test that shows HLA-DQ 2.2, HLA-DQ 2.5/8. I'd have to see it, but generally what 2.2 means is that you're on your alpha-1 gene, that you're homozygous for HLA-DQ2, which is a celiac pattern. And then on the 2.5s, that generally what that means is you have an O501 or an O505 on your HLA-DQ alpha-1 gene, which is also a celiac gene pattern. So yes, that's enough data to know that you have that genetic predisposition. When taking TRT, I assume you mean testosterone replacement therapy, is there a special diet to stay on? What is a special diet? I think one man's food is another man's poison. I think the best diet to stay on is the diet that's right for you. If you're having to take testosterone replacement, and bigger question to ask, in my opinion, Seb, would be, why do I need testosterone replacement? Why am I not making my own testosterone? What am I doing that's damaging my body's ability to produce its own testosterone? And if I made some changes in my diet or lifestyle, would I even need the medicine itself? And in that regard, you should know that gluten can reduce testosterone in men. It is one of the things we see. And so you might consider a gluten-free diet. And if you do that, and if you're not already gluten-free, what I have seen, be careful with that, because when you go gluten-free, a lot of times your body starts to heal. And if you're on medicine, your medicines can become too strong. So when your medicines are becoming too strong, there's typically a side effect profile that can set you up for problems as well. So just be aware of that and make sure you're monitoring your levels as you change your diet, if that's something that you're open to do. Let's see here. I'm in India, I'm suffering from gluten ataxia. Can I take your online treatment? I don't know what you mean by my online treatment. You certainly can use some of our products, but with ataxia, a lot of people have vitamin B12 deficiency because, again, one of the reasons gluten ataxia happens is because gluten-induced vitamin B12 deficiency, and B12 is a very important B vitamin that helps you myelinate your nerves. So the myelin coat around your nerves, you need vitamin B12 to make that coating. It's an insulation for your nerves. So for your nerves when they lose that myelin coating, you can develop all kinds of problems, and ataxia is on the list of problems. So you might consider taking, having your B12 checked and taking high doses of B12. There's no danger to you in taking high doses of B12, but there certainly is a danger if you need it and you're not getting it. What do we do for someone that's sick and keeps eating gluten and they won't recognize the root of the problem? They're taking drugs and making it worse. That's a question by Cindy. I would say this, look, you respect that other person's ability to make their own autonomous decisions about their health, and that is all you can do. If you try to carry their health on your shoulders, you will lose the relationship. If they're not ready to make a change, if they're not ready to recognize that diet change could have a great impact on their health, and you badger them, again, you run the risk of not having or losing the relationship. Now, some people would say, well, I don't want a relationship and watch somebody deteriorate. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's somebody you care about and love. The reality is we all have free will, and we all have the ability to make the decision to go and change our diet and feel better, or to continue to feel bad and take drugs to mask our symptoms. That's the choice we get to make as adults. It's not your right to make them or force them to see it, but what you can do is you can lead by example. You know, one of the reasons why I think I'm as popular as I am, you know, in the social strata is because I'm one of the very few doctors in the world that is an expert in nutrition that actually leads by example. Like, if you followed me around for 24 hours, you wouldn't see me sneaking a donut, you know, in the closet somewhere. If you followed me around on vacation, you wouldn't see me cheating on my diet. Like, the reality is, I practice what I preach. Why? Because I know that if I'm going to enforce change or help somebody see the light to make change, then the best way that I can accomplish that is to be a shining beacon of good health. And so in your situation, be the light for that person to see. Make sure you're healthy. Make sure that you're doing the right thing. Make sure you're setting the great example. And hopefully, by setting the example, you know, they may come to a point where they trust coming to you and saying, hey, what is it that you're doing? How does it that you stay so healthy for so long and I don't? Is there some enlightenment that you could pass on to me? That's how you get people to change. You're not going to coerce the change or force the change. And sometimes people won't change. Sometimes they just won't. Look, my mom, of all people in the world, my mom is not gluten-free. I have an older brother. He's not gluten-free. Are they struggling? Is their health fantastic? No, absolutely not. In my immediate family, the family I grew up with, I'm the healthiest of the bunch, arguably. And of my 5 siblings, the only one that's gluten-free is my older sister, who had very severe neurological problems and went gluten-free, and it was very helpful for her. So she saw that and made that change, and still to this day is gluten-free. But everyone else in my immediate family, you know, not my wife and my children, but my brothers, sisters that I grew up with, my mom, they are all inducted in the gluten eating hall of fame, if you will. We grew up on pastries, we grew up on sandwiches. I mean, we grew up on those kinds of food, cereals, and they still eat those things. And all of them, to a certain extent, pay a very, and what I would consider to be a costly health price. And I know more about gluten arguably than most people in the world, and they still aren't gluten-free. So if I can't get my own family to go there, don't beat yourself up for not being able to change the people's opinions in your life. Again, lead by example. When they come to you, then you have an opportunity to open their mind up. But all you can do in the meantime is plant little seeds of knowledge through your own examples, and hopefully they'll come around at some point in their lives before it's too late. Okay. I like this one. So Seb says, I had a friend who suffered from schizophrenia. When they changed his diet to carnivore from eating bread and other sugars, he snapped out of the schizophrenic state after 5 days. Yes, schizophrenia is one time was referred to as bread madness. And there are a lot of theories behind that. Bread can grow mold called ergo, and that mold can act as a hallucinogenic component, but then gluten can also induce antibodies that can trigger a schizophrenic-like state as well. So there are multiple mechanisms of how the brain can be altered or changed as a result of consuming gluten. But I'm glad your friend had the right people in his court to help him change his diet, because that, a lot of schizophrenics have a miserable existence, and the drugs for that particular disease are horrific. Let's go down in the middle too. Is it okay to put raw, organic, cage-free eggs in a vegetable smoothie with kale, spinach? Question being, is raw egg okay? But what you're going to hear about raw egg is that it will predispose you to E. coli or salmonella infectious bacteria. Rocky did it. If you're a fan of Rocky Balboa and the movies saga. I don't eat egg raw. A lot of people do. I think there's a minor risk, involved with eating raw egg, or potential risk there. But it's a decision that everybody gets to make for themselves, and it's just not me personally. It's not something I would do. And I have a couple dozen chickens at home, and have plenty of eggs. Just we cook them before we eat them. I love that. Gene says, I went gluten-free for 1 month. I've lost 5 pounds and can get my rings on again. Yeah, that water inflammation weight that you're holding on to is coming out. That's fantastic. Can you explain being diagnosed with Hashimoto's and thyroid levels being within normal ranges? My daughter's was recently told she had Hashimoto's and is starting diet change, including gluten, grain, and dairy-free. I thought Hashimoto's meant you also have hypothyroidism. Yeah, so your thyroid numbers, your TSH, T3, T4, Linda, can be normal. What Hashimoto's generally is when you have elevated antibodies. There are two main types of antibodies associated with hypothyroid Hashimoto's, and that is an antibody called TPO, thyroid peroxidase, and then another antibody called antithyroglobulin antibodies. So your daughter was probably, I'm assuming, but she was probably diagnosed with Hashimoto's because she was positive for those antibodies. And you can be positive for those antibodies even though your TSH, T3, and T4 are all normal. So it's good that she's on that, moving her diet in that direction, because many people with Hashimoto's antibodies, not only is there robust research that shows this, but I've seen this time and time again clinically. When people go gluten-free, their antibodies for their thyroid almost always come down. And in some cases come down completely to normal. So it's a good change. It's a good simple thing to do if you have Hashimoto's, to just change your diet first. Let's see here. Being gluten sensitive, is the gluten-free diet the only treatment? No meds yet to treat gluten dysfunction. Why would you want medicine for something that diet change completely reverses, Rich? I don't understand the quest for celiac medication. I know some people are foodies, the old adage is live to eat or eat to live. But to me, if you have a food that is a poison and behaves like a poison to your body, taking a medicine to suppress your immune system to block the symptoms of that poison is a horrible idea. And if you look at mainstream medicine already, most of it is symptomatic suppression through chemical manipulation. And it's a trick because, shutting your symptoms down by blocking your body's ability to ring the alarm bells to help you understand that you need to make changes is never a good idea. And if you look at historically over the last, let's just say 70, 80 years, we've prescribed, in the US specifically, we've prescribed more medicine than any other country, yet we rank last in health of all countries that are industrial in nature. And so throwing more medicine at the problem has not been the solution. We spent $3.2 trillion last year on healthcare, and have very little to show for it. We have more cancer, more heart disease, more diabetes, more hypothyroidism. We have more autoimmune disease. We have more chronic arthritis, more bone loss. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, despite using more medicine than everyone. And I think the order of magnitude is like, don't quote me on this, I can't remember where I read this, but it's like the U.S. uses at least double the quantity of medicine as every other country. Yet, again, we rank last. So using a medicine, I just don't understand the quest for a celiac medication, other than the people that are questing for it are probably just looking to hit a big payday. Just not something I would ever consider doing personally, but to each his own. Not trying to pick on you, Rich, just my opinion. Ruth says, no, not a question. I've been hearing about gluten enzyme supplements. Daisy wants to know, is this a made-up thing to sell us one more thing? No. There are digestive enzymes that are designed, Daisy, to help you break gluten down, because gluten can be very hard as a protein to digest. And that being said, if you're grain-free and you're not eating out and you're controlling your food at home, do you need one of these enzymes? No, not really. But if you're traveling all the time, if you're eating out on a regular basis, the big risk that people have is cross-contamination. So like you go to a restaurant and you say, okay, I want you to steam my vegetables and cook my meat on a separate hot surface and bring that to me with no gluten contamination. And let's say the chef was super busy, made a couple of mistakes, your food came to you and it was cross-contaminated with some gluten. That's where these enzymes can be helpful and beneficial, is again, if you're eating out or you're what we call eating OPF. OPF is other people's food. If you're not eating your own food, if you're eating other people's food, a good gluten enzyme to protect you from cross-contamination is not a bad idea. Now, if you're eating at home and you're controlling the food, I don't take them at home. If I'm traveling, I keep a bag of it in my travel bag because generally I don't like to eat out anyway, but when I travel, sometimes I'm forced to. And so when that happens, I usually take it with me and make sure I'm protecting myself. We carry something called gluten shield to that degree. I love this. Lita says, went gluten-free to support my daughter, and I went from 12 ibuprofen a day to 0. That's awesome. My daughter's blind in her left eye and has renal kidney disease. Can a gluten-free diet correct renal coloboma with a PAX2 gene mutation and aid in the reconnect of the renal to bring back eyesight? Don't know, Robert. There's a lot going on there. Will a gluten-free diet hurt your daughter is maybe the question to start with. And, I've never seen a gluten-free diet hurt anyone, not when done properly with real food. Now, gluten can cause renal damage, and there's robust evidence of this in the medical literature. Maybe we can do our post for Robert. We can put up our gluten renal or gluten and kidney damage blog post and video. I did an entire class on this, Robert, and you may find it helpful for your daughter, but I would encourage the change because it won't hurt her and it might very well help her tremendously. Do soybeans have gluten? No, they do not. Soybeans are gluten-free. However, they fall in the bean category, the legume category, and as I was referring to earlier, beans can sometimes be a challenge for people. You also have to watch out with soy because most of it's GMO and it's sprayed with heavy glyphosate, and those things are just not something I'll recommend if you're trying to restore your health. Can cladosporium and alternaria found in the house prevent the healing of leaky gut in someone who has been gluten-free for over 10 years? Possibly. Mold is such a deep dive, and definitely mold and mold toxins can contribute to a deterioration of health, including leaky gut. And if your diet, but there's a lot of nuance to the question that you asked, which is you say you've been gluten-free for over 10 years, but are you truly gluten-free? Are you wheat, barley, and rye-free and eating all the corn and rice and other things that are labeled gluten-free? Because I have also seen that be the case where people's diets were just not dialed in well enough. They were traditionally gluten-free, but relying on packaged, processed, grain-based foods to fill the gaps, and they don't get better. We actually, if you read my book, No Grain, No Pain, there's a section in it, and we talk about a concept called gluten-free whiplash, which is when people go gluten-free, they feel a little bit better, but then they start going backward again, and then they don't heal because they're just replacing wheat, barley, and rye with other grains, and that's a huge mistake. What do you think about tubers and cassava flour for cooking, being a celiac person? I think they're fine. I think where you got to watch out with the tubers and the cassava is quantity. You know, I've seen it where if you have them here and there and you mix them in with your regular diet, you're probably going to be just fine. But where you get in trouble is if you're eating, you know, cassava and tapioca as a staple food. They're very high glycemic, so you're going to get, you know, you're going to take your carbohydrate concentration up potentially too high. When your carbs are too high in your diet, that can cause your blood sugar to rise, makes your blood thicker, makes it harder to deliver oxygen and nutrients to your tissues, and it can slow down healing and contribute to, you know, metabolic syndrome and diabetes. So you just have to be careful that you're not overdoing it. But they are gluten-free, and they are palatably, they are a good option for things like bread or you know, or other kind of gluten replacements. It's just I've just seen people overdo those to such an extensive degree. So just be careful. What would be the best supplement for depression, and how much should a person take? I'm using rhodiola, but I'm not sure about the dosage and if there is another supplement I can add. I mean, that's a big question, Deborah, because it largely depends on why you're depressed. I mean, there's a lot you can try. I would say with depression, a good B vitamin complex should be in your mix. We have something called B Complete, and so if you're looking to improve your Bs, take 2 of those a day. I would also just suggest starting with a very high quality multivitamin, because a lot of depression, it manifests as a result of calcium, magnesium, B vitamin deficiencies, can manifest from zinc deficiency. So, you know, just covering all of your broad bases and making sure you're getting those things in is not a bad idea. But, you know, all that being said, if that's not giving you a resolution, you really want to do a deeper dive on why you have depression. Because otherwise you'll never, you know, you can take all the supplements in the world, but if you're not hitting the right note, you know, none of it's going to be super helpful in the long run. If you have gluten sensitivity, can you become celiac? Yes, you can. But you can have gluten sensitivity and never become celiac. Remember, there are over 100 different disease associations with gluten. If you watched Tuesday's show, and if you didn't, you can go back and watch that. Did we put a link up to that show? Yeah, we got a link in the feed for you. Let's see here. Is bad breath, painful burning lips, mouth, tongue, and throat, and trouble swallowing symptoms of gastritis? It can be. It absolutely can be. Is cabbage juice a good remedy? Well, cabbage juice might be helpful in that situation. It's possible. It's certainly something you could try. How can my sister tell if her DNA has been altered by the recent, oh gosh, I'm not going to go there. There's no way to tell, Mark. There's just no way to tell. Nobody has the ability to look into that to see whether or not, you know, that's changed irreparably somebody's DNA. Okay, so we're coming back to the cholesterol question. And it looks like Mary Ellen answered it first. She said the drug manufacturers. So coming back to our cholesterol question, which is, you know, as cholesterol went from 280 to 250 to 220 to 200, who was responsible for making those changes? The most correct answer is drug manufacturers, yes. So there were several panels of doctors involved in all those different changes, but the vast majority of those doctors worked directly for Merck and Pfizer, who had been granted waivers from the FDA that even though they had conflict of interest could still sit on those boards and make those decisions. And so it's the fox in the hen house, right? And so we need to get Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen, if you'll reach out to glutenology@gmail.com and we'll send you your free tote. Thanks for participating. I read somewhere in a comment on a video that it's not so much gluten sensitivity, but it's Roundup and glyphosate. I would argue that. I would say we have both. let's not dismiss gluten sensitivity. I mean, prior to the use of glyphosate, 1% of the population had celiac disease and still does. So, there was no glyphosate then. So I don't think we could argue that it's just glyphosate. I think we could certainly argue that glyphosate's playing a major role in poisoning, the masses. I definitely agree that glyphosate is a problem. And if you'd like, you can check out my interview with Dr. Seneff at MIT, and we went into a deep dive on glyphosate. And talked all about it. But there are mechanisms of gluten-induced damage just as well as there are mechanisms of glyphosate-induced damage. And I think a lot of people too much try to dismiss that to the demise of their own health. And I see that a lot clinically, where people think that thing, and then so they go buy organic heirloom grains and start eating those, and then they're still in my office sick and wondering why. But they're gluten-sensitive individuals. Is using herbs to create a strong vitamin C as good as supplements? I don't think there's anything wrong with using herbs that are rich in vitamin C to take as a supplemental in your diet. Now, if you're trying to get high doses of vitamin C, 5+ grams a day, that's going to be hard to do with just some general herbs. I think it just depends on what you're trying to do, Darren, and what you're trying to use the vitamin C for. Let's see here. Have a high iron but low ferritin on blood labs. In general, what can cause this? So how high is your iron and how low is your ferritin? And what, there are a number of other things that would need to be looked at, Artie. Hemoglobin hematocrit, ceruloplasmin, iron binding capacity, and then other nutrients would need to be looked at, like copper and vitamin B6, because there's a pretty broad pathway around iron and iron metabolism and anemias that are not always apparent by just the simple blood test of looking at your iron panel and your ferritin. So it's hard to answer that question without that other data. It is almost like a paradoxical pattern, but why that paradoxical pattern for you is there, you need that other data to parse that out. Are there DNA tests for gluten sensitivity in Europe? Yeah, we do ship to Europe. You just have to reach out to my team, glutenology@gmail.com, if you're looking to get genetically tested and you're in Europe. Just reach out and talk to our team, and they can guide you in that direction. Let's see here. We got anything further down? Why does TSH become elevated with the use of 2% iodide drops? It's an elevation. Iodine creates a flaw in the test and can elevate artificially your TSH, Savita. This is true for any of you that are out there that are taking iodine for your thyroid, and then you're going in to get your thyroid levels checked. You will come back possibly with an artificially elevated TSH that your doctor might perceive to be hypothyroidism. So you have to be careful. Before doing any kind of thyroid testing, you should always be off of iodine and vitamin B7, which is biotin. Be off of those two nutrients a good week before you commit to doing a test for those. What is Aspergillus oryzae? It's a type of mold that commonly grows on rice. And Aspergillus can produce different types of chemical mold toxins that can be detrimental to human health. Can I explain hyperparathyroid? Maybe we'll have to do a class on that. That's not a 30-second bit. Yeah, so Barbara's asking, let's take one more question. Barbara's asking, will you explain your two multivitamins and how do we decide which one to take? So I have two different formulas. I have multi-nutrients and I have ultra-nutrients. The biggest difference between the two is that multi-nutrients has higher levels of B vitamins. So if you're looking to get extra B vitamins, then that is the one that you want to pick. Now, if you're looking for a good quality multi with normal amount of B vitamins, some people are B vitamin sensitive, and so taking too much will be overstimulative to them, then ultra nutrients is a better formula for you. Can you recommend a supplement for a concussion? High dose fish oil, 6 to 10 grams a day if the concussion is new. There's a lot of research around high doses of omega-3 improving blood supply and reducing the risk of chronic traumatic injury to the brain after a concussion. Love this. So Equal says, I started gluten-free the first week of April, then grain-free in mid-April when I found you. This grain-free diet is amazing. I'm off all my thyroid medications. Thanks for publishing your work. Well, you're welcome. Thanks for listening, having the courage to change. Okay, I think I'm up on the hour, and my stomach is letting me know because I'm pretty hungry and it's growling. Thank you guys for tuning in and spending your Thursday afternoon with me. Look, if you want to make sure you get our information. Like I said at the start of the show, come visit me at Gluten Free Society and sign up there for our free newsletter, and you'll always get updates from me. You'll always get the information, and you'll be navigating away from the censorship environment that we've all found ourselves to be in of late. And that being said, don't forget, if you're in for knowing whether or not you're gluten sensitive, take advantage of our sale. It's our 20% off sale this week on DNA test kits, and we posted the link to that up. There's no coupon code. You can just click the link and it's already discounted for you. So those of you looking to know and looking to make the change and want to be empowered by the right information, go check that out. Make sure you tune in next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're doing a major crash course on bone health. So looking forward to that one. We'll see you then, Tuesday night at 6 p.m., and we'll see you back here next Thursday at 12:30. Have a fantastic weekend. Take care.